as long as Turbo gets fit, I think, rightfully or wrongfully, I think Daley will go for the big fella in the centres.
I saw enough from Turbo the other day to suggest that he's got to come straight back in. They scored for me, it would have been the try of the year. It went through probably about 12 sets of hands, and it was just lightning. I said to you before we hit record, I watched it about 10 times, and I couldn't for the life of me see where the forward pass was. Absolutely dudded.
Yep. Yeah, the Warriors fans certainly come out after us, and they were right in this instance.
A bit to unpack today, Steve. We're going to talk about are marquee players having too big of an influence on individual teams' results. What else we got, mate?
Mate, there's a bit of a injury crisis starting to hit the Blues, so we have a quick chat about that. And we also have some absolutely gang-busting stats from our resident stat guy, Will. Can't wait to unpack that.
Yeah, it's going to be cracker. The Bulldogs had a shift. That'll be interesting to see the impact of that going forward, whether they stick with it. It seemed to work. They got the win. And I'm on board now with our Warriors fans saying that they get dudded by the refs because they got an all-time howler on the weekend. Let's get into it. All right, marquee players. Traditionally, the Panthers have gone pretty well without their main guys there and Cleary. But they fell short, and you reckon you're starting to see a bit of a pattern here with teams?
Yeah, I have, mate. It's been an interesting one. We got a shout out from one of our listeners. We noticed a lot of teams over the weekend had some players out because they were backing up, and usually, traditionally, they're their best players, obviously, over Origin. But Panthers are a little bit different with not only Cleary, but Yo and To'o were both out as well, and they're obviously two of the best players in their positions in the NRL. Don't get me wrong, but they weren't the same without Cleary's direction. Ivan said in the press conference they just didn't ice their moments. Well, that's what Cleary does at the NRL level. I thought that was interesting, but some bigger ones for me, the Knights without Ponga should have been beaten by the Dragons. It's as simple as that. The Val just didn't look like he was interested, didn't kick well, and certainly didn't defend well either. Those first two tries were on him. So, the Knights without Ponga, they're a slip down the pecking order. We've seen what's happened with South as soon as Latrell's gotten injured, which will obviously be an ongoing thing now. He's done his what looks to be a hamstring. While the Dolphins got a win, they weren't as polished without Katoa. And then even mid-game, we saw with the Storm, Canberra were well in front and doing very well on the scoreboard because Grant started on the bench, come on, and changed the game himself. So I just see a few of those marquee players really having a big impact. Walsh hasn't missed too much football, but hasn't been playing well, and that correlates for in my mind to where the Broncos are sitting on the ladder. You've been banging on for a while now. Obviously, Moses has missed chunks of the game, but who's Paris spending their money on?
Yep.
No one can say that the Dragons or the Titans have marquee player. The Raiders, you could argue potentially Strange is heading in that direction. So I really see these marquee players being absolutely everything. Even just one can change the fortune of your team from a top 8 team to a bottom 4 team. So it's just an interesting watch, not only during Origin time, but if one of these guys like a Latrell go down injured, the impact on the team is quite evident to see.
Yeah, we might even get Will to have a bit of a look at that one because that's definitely been more the case this year than in previous years. There have been some good teams that have been able to manage without their best players consistently, but it definitely showing up. Even the Roosters the other week without Walker and Tedesco, they just looked a shell of the team that they are with all those guys there. Now we talked about it's got some quality there and DCE's still there, but yeah, those big names definitely make a difference. That is an interesting one. That's one I'd love to hear from the listeners, what they think and what they've noticed about their team specifically. Oh, speaking of, we have to remind you, we've got if you're a Roosters fans, you're going to enjoy Wednesday's episode. We've got a Roosters fan coming in to talk all things of your team from a fan perspective. Now, just what we're talking about, individual players' impact, the Brisbane Cowgirls asked us a question about Tommy Did and being fit, whether he should come back into Origin, and the suggestion from her was that quite possibly that was not the right thing to do, given how good Sam Walker's been going. I tend to agree. I think not that Queensland would give two shits what we think, but they'd be getting a better result given how Walker's gone in those first two games to put in at 14. Because imagine him coming on late. What do you think?
Yeah, look, for mine, I probably agree with our listener. I think, Queensland win. I think Walker wins the Wally Lewis medal for man of the series. I think he's been, he was obviously quiet that back end of game one for obvious reasons, but I think he's been an absolute breath of fresh air. I don't think New South Wales has put the pressure on him at different times they should have from their edge forwards, but he's been phenomenal. And I think at this stage, those halves are playing real well. I think it'd be very hard to leave Dearden out next year. But then again, who are you going to leave out? Because Walker and Munster are obviously two impressive players. You saw what Munster did in game two. He's just that leader. He may not be the alpha like Tino. He may not be that big front rower, but everyone just feels comfortable that Munster's out there with him. So, look, I probably agree with the listener. I'd leave Dearden out. But an impressive man to be able to leave out of your squad. I think if it was he had a couple of games under his belt, I think he might find his way onto the bench. But not for me the way the Maroons have played for 3 out of the 4 halves.
Yep. Now, while we're talking Origin, we've got news today that Latrell Mitchell's not going to be fit. He's limped off, calf problem. There's no way that they would pick him, I think, without having played a game. As a Para fan, that's a blessing for us. We're playing them Thursday night, but without having played, and then also we've seen what's happened in the first few games when we've had players that can't train. It's not going to be what we need in this last game. We need guys who are ready to go. And to me, we talked about this last episode. Bradman Best has come into that Blues jersey and has played at an elite level every time. So you got a guy fit there, provided he gets through this weekend. All right, that's just a no-brainer for me.
Yeah. Latrell's unfortunately gone. They've put out the old line that we're going to send him to scans and see how bad it is. But I also heard that one of the South guys have said that the whole club's so disappointed for him. So this isn't just a little minor strain. This is obviously pretty serious. So he's going to miss game 3. I think that's going to put a big dent in the South Sydney's chances. If he's out any longer than 2 or 3 weeks, it's going to be hard. They're sitting at 7 wins, 6 losses, right there on the bubble. When you've got teams like the Storm and the Sharks coming for those bottom spots on the 8, I think that's really going to hurt South. As far as New South Wales goes, he's been a big loss the entire series. I think Stagg's been okay in some instances and then pretty average in others. So I can't see Stags holding his spot. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go back to Turbo. I know you're a huge Best fan, as I am. But I think having the outside back in that number 18 or 19 jersey that can come on in case of an injury for a straight swap, I reckon Daley might throw the dice. As long as Turbo gets through this week's game for Manly, they're up against the Storm. So as long as Turbo gets fit, I think, rightfully or wrongfully, I think Daley will go for the big fella in the centres.
I saw enough from Turbo the other day to suggest that he's got to come straight back in. Turbo's generally played on the right centre when he's played for the Blues, so you can put them both in. Kohler then becomes such a valuable weapon on the bench as that guy who can come on and play anywhere from 1 to 6 really, and that starts getting a better balance to the team as well. So, yeah, plenty for Daley to think about, but we need star quality to go up there and win. And I don't care if he's not at 100%. Like I said, I saw enough from Turbo to suggest that just coming out of our own end. Like, he just eats up the meters. He's such a big man. Got so much power. Just got to get in there for mine.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I agree. And as I said, the vulnerability of him going down injured when you've only got 4 on the bench isn't as big a concern for me. When, to your point, if they can have Kohler sitting there in the 18 jersey, if he does go down, it's a straight swap. It's only one interchange. It's not the end of the world.
Yep.
I think they'll definitely go with Turbo in the centre spot. But yeah, I'm genuinely expecting him to make 4 or 5 changes, because when the cold facts hit him in the face, at the end of the day, he got it wrong in game 2. I still think he got it wrong in game 1. So I'm expecting him to make 4 or 5 changes, and Turbo will be one of them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, everyone's got to get through fit and healthy for this upcoming round 17 game. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on the back end of that, mate.
Yeah, apparently there was an article this morning from Dean Ritchie suggesting that Liam Martin, you can pencil him in as well. So he's going to go back to the tried and tested, and I don't mind that at all.
No, well, that'll be a big one. You know, I think Munster and Walker have had far too much time with the football. You know, Walker's been able to almost play that off the cuff admittedly, but that NRL style where he can do what he wants. I don't think we've shut down his time with the ball. So traditionally, Martin's up against Munster, but regardless of which side they play, I think they've really got to pressure these halves and slow them down. So I won't be shocked at all to see Liam Martin slide straight back in the side. Truth be told, I was probably a little surprised he didn't get a bait in game 2, mate. Yep.
Origin's all about moments, and we didn't win those moments. We were well in the game at half-time, and you need guys who are going to own those moments. And added bonus for Liam Martin, he's just got a bit of that mongrel, that bit of Looney Tunes in him, and that is absolutely what we need. So get him in. The Dogs shifted Stephen Crichton to the 6th and then put Burton out wide. It certainly worked in terms of freeing Burton up to run, and he had a heap of runs and a heap of metres. They seemed more fluent in attack. It did seem like Galvin also had a bit more license just to run and play what he saw. Maybe he's been doing that the whole time, but having Crichton there with more of the communication and organisation seemed to work. Is it sustainable though, mate?
Oh, look, I don't think so. You know, Crichton had one run in that first half. I don't think there's enough there for that to be sustainable. If they've got to move Burton into the centres to get him running the ball, then he's not in the right spot. So he should be running the ball at 6 just as much as he's running the ball at 4. So for me, there's a breakdown there in communication and game plan for them. Look, I've been thinking about the Bulldogs a lot because we've bashed up the old doggies for most of the season, and we've had to go at Gus for tweaking. But I look back at while they haven't got it right now, right, and they've admitted that they've mucked around with Bailey Hayward on the bench now. They've changed Crichton into 6, Burton out into the centres. They know that it's not right. But I look back to last year, they had the spine of Mahoney, Sexton, Burton, Tracy. Now, while they were leading the comp at August, let's call it, that's not a premiership winning spine either, right? So while they haven't got it right, they weren't right last year. And I know a lot of the Bulldogs fans will be listening and thinking that they were leading the comp and they were going well. Well, even Canterbury's own feedback was that they had a very soft draw the start last season, right? So I think they had to make changes. I just don't think they made the right ones. And now they're playing catch up because they've figured that out, that it's not the right fit. So, I'm still not – I don't know how they spent as much money as they did on Crichton to play in the centres. Everyone said he's the best communicator in the team. He's the best leader. Well, he's one off the sideline. So for me, they've just mucked everything up with what they've tried to do with their spine and their salary cap. So for mine, it's not a long-term fix. They may do this for the end of the season if they can see some green shoots to try and keep some of the fans happy. But they need to come up with a rethink on the entire spine before anything's long-term at all for mine.
Yep, I think you're right. Should we do that game while we're here? The Dogs Seagulls. It's the first time that Kieran Foran has looked stressed in the box, I reckon. He particularly in that second half, he just looks so agitated. Usually he's cool as a cucumber. They were decent, Manly, but they certainly weren't as dominant as they have been in recent performances. Now, is that a product of the doggies heading in the right direction, or you reckon they might have been off a bit?
I probably think column A and column B. I certainly think the doggies played a bit better. And while Crichton didn't run the ball, especially in the first half, Burton did. So I can see that there's been a little bit of, there's a little bit of a spring in their step from that aspect. But yeah, Manly just didn't quite seem as polished and as sharp as what they have been, mate. So I certainly think they're a bit of column A and a bit of column B for mine.
There's certainly some panic when they went down to the final 10 minutes and that they needed a field goal for the win. I thought the Dogs were going to blow it again because they just did everything wrong in the lead up to try and get him set up. And they blew a couple, but I didn't think Manly were much better, to be fair. I did like this one move from Luke Brooks. Now, we talked about Jacob Carraz, how good he is at getting the offload. Well, I wonder if that's something they identified, that because he generally has that ball ready to promote, that Brooks just went straight to the ball rather than trying to tackle him, and got a strip there at the end. It was a good little move.
Yeah, it was. So there was a bit there. We spoke about that back line from Manly on the preview for Monday night's. Wednesday night's episode. They've certainly got ability, so they'll they may just have had that off night. They've been up for quite some time now. Interesting, similar to the Dragons game where Manly scored more tries than the opposition, but couldn't kick a goal. And obviously Garrick, one of the better goal kickers in the NRL, so they'll be a little bit disappointed that they got 3 tries and couldn't get the win. But look, hats off to the Bulldogs. We've given them a little bit over the last few weeks, but they got the win in the end, and that's all that matters, mate.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of the Dogs, we recorded with our stats man, Will Badel, and today, mate, you got to stick around for this one. It was so good. Steve and I were genuinely excited after we jumped off that call with him, and he does talk about the Dogs and some of the things happening there, so the Doggies fans are like this too. Let's have a look at that now. Great to have you back again, Will. How are you, mate?
Okay, yeah, mate.
Yeah,
Steve?
Going well.
Yeah, g'day. Good to see you, Will. Got some interesting stats for us today, mate.
I've been working hard, so yeah, hopefully we get some more gold today.
Absolutely. Got some great feedback on the work you did in that first episode, so keep the good stuff coming. Now, you got an interesting stat on the Dogs. Now, we all know that they've had a little bit of a bounce back. I don't know if it actually suggests they're fully back, but you've got some interesting data on what they've been doing the last, not just this year, but last year.
Yeah, so the Doggies fans, there's bluer skies on the horizon. So before the Manly game, the last 3 weeks in a row, so around 12, 13 and 14, they had over 50 tackle breaks in each of those games. So that's the highest, at least I'm going back to the start of our 2025. So for all the listeners out there, the way that stats are actually coded, like your tackle breaks come off the back of a run naturally, and then off the back of those, you get your line breaks, which lead into your points scored. So half the battle, I would say, has been consistent for the past almost month of the Dogs, over 50 tackle breaks in those games. Hasn't translated yet into points, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you go into the detail of what was happening in the first part of the season when they were really struggling?
Well, they were basically around the 30 mark, and they had him 24 on the weekend. That was with Stephen Crichton, obviously playing 6. He only had 1 run as well. So that's obviously an area of the game. He was in there more from a communication standpoint, and they also said that they were looking to get more ball to Birdo, Matt Burton, to, get him into the game and simplify his game. So, they're still trying to figure themselves out. Obviously, they've had some bad news this afternoon, I think, with probably one of their best tackle breakers and certainly the hardest runner in Satili Tupanua. He's torn his hamstring. He's out for a couple of months, which could be the season for them, which is a bad one. But I think Jacob Preston comes back in as well. So it's a bit like for like there. Lockie Galvin gets his partner in crime back. So There's definitely been an increase in those last 3 weeks. Earlier on the year, averaging around either 30 or 40 mark, maybe a bit lower. The highest amount for 25 was later in the year. I think it was around 23 and around 26, where they're around the 44 mark.
Okay.
The highest amount this year in one game was the Panthers against the Knights, where they won 44-12, and they had 59. So you can see that the Dogs are in the ballpark there, and they're certainly asking questions of the opposition. And a lot of that, I think, should also be mentioned, that a lot of that also comes from Jacob Kiraz, who's obviously a extremely important man in their team when it actually comes to these tackle breaks.
Yeah, not just having tackle breaks himself, but creating them with his second phase. Like his offloads are off the charts, and then
absolutely.
he creates space for the. I imagine, without not knowing the specifics, that there'd be line breaks off the back of that because it breaks up the line, and suddenly they're going again. So what you're saying is they're still a bit clunky, but they're now generating more opportunities to score points with line breaks, which statistically shows that there's generally tries off the back of that. That's good news. They'll definitely miss Tupanua. Is there a harder running forward in the game at the moment? The good news is that there were certainly signs there from Thompson and King that maybe they're heading in the right direction there as well. So maybe something has clicked and they're starting to head towards something better. What do you reckon, Steve?
Yeah, look, certainly you mentioned a few. Obviously, Kiraz, Preston, Kickout, Tupanua, 4 of the best runners of the ball in the competition across any position, and they've all had injuries at different times. So to have them all on the park, they're a lot better off at the same time, obviously. I think this just reiterates the problem that we've seen with the Bulldogs, that they can't actually score points at the other end of the field. They trail only the Dragons in points scored this season, and that's going to be their biggest problem still ongoing. They're obviously still, mucking around with their spine a little bit. But to Will's point, at least the first step in the dance is happening. They've got some very strong ball runners. If they can get themselves down the other end of the park, then they just need that spark in the halves or at hooker to be able to convert to points. But bloody interesting to hear that they're getting that first bit accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. Now this is an interesting one. Nathan Cleary, probably there's some justification around his performance in game 2. It's also he missed a few tackles, but with the ball, if you're losing the ruck and your forwards aren't dominating, there's not too many halfbacks that can pull games out of the fire when that's happening. But you've gone into the number of involvements and touches compared to club footy, and also the impact of working with Mitchell Moses as well.
Yeah, so this was a bit of a deep dive on this one. This was obviously, just having a look at every carry from both game 1 and game 2, and we'll certainly ask the question about who his partner in crime should be going into game 3. So if we look at game 1, in terms of his side and dominance and left and right, he had a 53% dominance. So basically, that's saying that he was popping up on both the left and the right hand side of the field, which is not uncommon to hear, because you've obviously got a Ethan Strange there who was the less dominant half, and Nathan, that's how he tends to play when he's playing for the Panthers. So compare that to game 2. On the right hand side, he was 70%. So a lot more dominant on one side of the field, but in saying that, he also had half the amount of touches from game to game. So a total of 60 in game 1 and a total of 30 in game 2.
Yeah, interesting.
So if we compare that to his Panthers average for this year, that's at 66 per game. So you can see the correlation with game 1, and the question's got to be asked whether you want the best half in the comp to be touching the ball half the amount of time. So that's a you're sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul there, I guess, is a good analogy. Nothing against Moses, but it's certainly, is going to have some impact with how it comes to both of them just being able to share the workload. But Nathan in particular, who I think this year is actually, contrary to the fact I actually think he's broken out of his structure a lot more in this year. And I actually think he's definitely been playing, both sides of the ruck for the Panthers more than I think I've ever seen, at least in the last 5 years. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for Game 3.
Yeah, it certainly is. And there's generally been this consensus that you pick your best players and then you find a spot for them. But I think now that the game is getting so much more refined that having specialist positions has never been more important. And I think that's probably what's shown up for New South Wales in Game 2 is that we got a guy playing in the back row who's playing on the wrong side and he gets found out defensively. I heard might have been Willie Mason talking about it. It was one of those guys who's talking about how you might not think it's a big deal, but you get so used to moving in these structures in a certain direction, it actually is quite an adjustment. And then, as you say, Ethan Strange is a runner. I mean, Steve's been banging on about this all year, that maybe the right place is not to have another dominant halfback because it takes away a lot of that value of the best halfback in the game. Steve, thoughts?
Yeah, you're spot on. We've been talking about it for quite some time now, and we mentioned how unfair the criticism around Cleary's been that he hasn't dominated Origin level. Well, Will's just broken it down on the reason why. It's because he hasn't been given the opportunity. Basically, Daley's parked him out on one side of the field and told him he's only to touch the ball 30 times 30 times a game. It's just, we mentioned earlier that he hamstrung 3 of our top players from game 1 to 2 with the way his bench rotation, with Radley, Murray, and then he didn't play Strange until the last minute. Well, now the guy who did win the man of the match, now we find out he's just locked him into one side of the park and only given him 30 touches. It just begs belief that Will's provided these numbers and someone in Blues headquarters still doesn't understand what's going on. So for me, you can't have 2 halfbacks. It was blatantly obviously they split the field. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I genuinely hope, while Moses was quiet on game 2, he just, for mine, didn't do enough. So I genuinely hope they go back to giving the steering wheel to Cleary and having Strange run the ball there on that left edge.
And just another point about that as well, Steve. If we just put if we put a bow tie on that one, that game that everyone's been referring to about Mitchell in Melbourne a couple of years ago, his 6 was Jerome Luai, who's another runner. So like that, that also feeds into the narrative, whether it's right or wrong. Look, they've got to live and die by their own decisions at the end of the day. But there are some coincidences there.
Yeah, absolutely.
For mine, if you want to play Moses, you have to drop Cleary. I can't see how they both can be in the 13. It's one or the other, and for mine, it's Cleary every day of the week. He proved that again in Origin 1, but huge shout. Well, that's exactly the sort of stats that the listeners have been asking for, mate.
Yeah, spot on, mate. That's perfect. Now, talking about Panthers, interesting one here. They once they're leading at half-time, they don't generally get knocked off. Tell us the details, Will.
Yeah, so it was 12 from 12 up until the Gold Coast game, and then they've dropped their bundle from a Zane Harrison field goal. He actually nailed it well, executed one, had a really good game.
He did.
Unfortunately, that was their first loss this year after leading at half-time. So yeah.
Something we didn't talk about when we were wrapping up Origin is that Tino's father passing, that was always going to motivate him to a big game, and I'm sure the Queenslanders, apparently they all had his name written on their tape on their wrists, and then they did a pretty touching tribute there at the Seabus Stadium for the Titans as well. So, good to see the Titans get a win, but that is interesting. They don't generally get run down. It's another big up for the Titans.
Yeah, bloody oath. Tell me this next one, Will. The rugby league world's healing, mate. I can't wait to hear the good news.
Yeah, I've kept this one under wraps from you guys, from everybody else who will be able to hear it now. But yes, the rugby league world is healing. Line dropouts. So as you guys, heard a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned a few stats around that. Great news is that the round just gone, 64% of dropouts were long dropouts.
Yep.
They're back. So hopefully teams are, hey, you know what? It just coincides with our podcast that they're starting to go long, right? So
it's all on us, mate.
The coaches are obviously listening. All the halves, the spine members have jumped on, and finally they're going long. Rewards for kicks into the in goals and a good kick chase, trapping the back three in the in goals, get the ball back. The world is healing. The rugby league world is healing.
That's good. They obviously heard your stats, mate. The conversion rate wasn't real high on short kick out, so we heard it here first from you a couple of weeks ago, and the teams have followed suit, mate.
Thankfully.
Good man. Changing the world, mate. Look at you go.
One dropout at a time.
Exactly.
Very good.
Fantastic, mate. Mate, if you keep going on this trajectory, because that was so good today, mate, you're going to need your own show. But that was bloody fantastic, Will. Some absolute gold there. We're going to have to test you a little bit more in the next week and see what else you can come up with, but that's fantastic.
No worries, boys. Thank you.
Cheers, Will.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, guys.
Steve, how good was that?
Mate, that was excellent. To hear some of those statistics around Cleary with Origin, it'll certainly be something that Daley needs to have a long, hard think about when he selects the team for Origin 3. And as Will delighted in telling us, Rugby League's back with the dropout. So he gave us the info last fortnight, and now the teams have finally caught up, mate. So yeah, some absolutely fantastic stats. I genuinely can't wait to next week now to see what he brings for us.
Absolutely. Obviously, the coaches have been watching the Sport is Life podcast, and they've taken the point and they've gone, yeah, maybe we are on the wrong path here. It's time to go long.
Yeah.
Bloody fantastic. All right, let's get back into the game reviews. Knights Dragons, mate, we talked about it, and I don't think you were as convinced as I was, but they're on a charge, the Drags, and they are heading in the right direction. And even the last bounce of the ball, like, they were so unlucky not to win this game.
Yeah, they were, mate. As we said during the Doggies review, the Drags scored more tries, getting over the line 4 times. Unfortunately, Val could only convert half of them. So those 2 penalties, especially the one right on half time, was really telling. I sort of agreed with Cook as well, where if you're going to give that penalty, you should have given 4 or 5 throughout the game at different times for laying in the ruck. But look, the Dragons are getting better. We said a couple of weeks ago when Dean Young took the reins that all you can hope for as a Dragons fan is they get on the improve, right? At no stage were they going to make the semis or have a run for it. It was just show improvement. And genuinely each week you can see that. And as a fan, a supporter, while it's frustrating we don't get the win, at least you can see the promise. Those young forwards, we talk about them every week. Dylan Egan was just absolutely phenomenal on Friday night. Obviously got the try he so thoroughly deserved and gave Val an opportunity to tie the match. But he was huge all night, as were the Couchmans, like always. The list goes on for their forwards. And we mentioned Ponga being out was a big loss for Newcastle, but it goes to show you how valuable he truly is to those Knights teams. So, look, positive steps for the Drags, but unfortunately not to be. I felt real bad for Flanagan. Out of everything he's been through, a lot of it unfairly for mine, he probably deserved, just that little bit of ounce of luck right there on the bell, but that's the way the rugby league ball bounces, mate.
Yeah, that's it. Sometimes when it's running against you and it's running against you. It's such an important win for the Knights because you mentioned the Bunnies before in that logjam of teams. We've got the Warriors on 24, then we've got 3 teams on 22, 3 teams on 20 and 2 teams on 18. Yeah. They're the games you got to win, and to me that's a really good sign for the Knights. That's probably one they got away with, and they're managing to win some of those games. So for a young team learning how to win ugly effectively and maybe get one of those games that they wouldn't have normally won, it's a massive step in the right direction for them. Yeah,
huge, mate. To the point around the marquee players that we spoke about earlier, it's one thing not to play as well without them, but if you can grab the 2 points and still win without them, that's when it counts. Everyone, with respect to the Broncos, have beaten the Dragons this year. So if you drop a game to the Drags, that's 2 points that the whole competition's got that you haven't. So for the Knights, it was very valuable, and pushes them, as you said, into equal third spot, fifth on for and against. So they've put themselves in a position to make the semis now. They've won a handful of games on the way in, and they're in the semis, which is a huge effort considering how they had been performing the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Yeah, unless they get a string of really key injuries, I can't see him missing now, which is a fantastic result for Justin Holbrook, given he went there with such low expectations on how the team would perform. I know you and I had them finishing around that 15th, 16th mark. So, what a massive tick for him. And again, we've talked about this before. Maybe he was doing a better job at the Titans than what he was given credit, given how much they've struggled since then. Now, the Dolphins have quietly slipped into third position, and without a couple of key players, they still too good for a Tigers team that weren't awful and are heading in the right direction. But, mate, they're going to go a long way this year, I would think, the Dolphs.
Yeah, mate. Every week we talk about them, and every week our praise grows. They were very good. As I said, not quite as polished, especially in that first half without Katoa. You can certainly tell that if they're going to make a run against the Panthers and the Warriors, they're going to need Katoa there. But those outside backs, they're just something special. So to see them be able to do that without Katoa, without Hammer, and a couple of the forwards backing up was very impressive. The Tigers really, really tried hard. Yeah. You know, and I know sometimes that's little consolation when they don't get the win. They're on the bubble in 10th spot, 7-7. So they do need to get a couple of wins. But to see the way the Tigers fought that first half, there was only 2 points in it at half time. They really did well. They just desperately need a couple of those injured players back, Twal especially up front, and then obviously Dewey. Patrick Herbert's gone down. Looks like he's done his shoulder, which could be the season for him. But, yeah, look, they need to be fully fit. They don't quite have the depth at the moment. But hats off to the Dolphins. They were, without those players, very, very impressive performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'd be good. You mentioned before, like, they showed a lot of fight. As a fan, that's what you want to see from your team. Mm. You want to know that they're in the contest. You can deal with losses if they're having a crack. Of course, you don't like your team to lose, but the Tigers fans would be happy given that the season seemed to be slipping away there at one point. It also does go to show just the differing class between those top few teams and the rest, because the Tigers are just at the bottom of that logjam of teams and probably not quite at that same level just yet. We mentioned this before when we spoke to Will. The Titans had plenty of reasons to compete in this one. They also came back from a halftime deficit. What I really liked, he mentioned there, Zane Harrison. He looks like a class act, doesn't he? He had a couple of really good passes for tries. The one to bring them level when he hit the back row or out the front, mate, that was fantastic.
Yeah, he has just got that little bit of class about him. I think the big thing with him is he has that time that they all talk about, where he can just seems like he's just got that half a second longer. As a young player, especially a half, the two things you want to see is them getting better and learning from their games that they play. The NRL is such a tough school to have to learn in as you go. So for him to get better every week's a huge thing. And then the second one is that they want the ball when the game's on the line. Right, and at the end of the day, 79 minutes, you're up against Penrith, the famous Penrith Panthers. For a young fella to say, "Yeah, give me the ball, I'm going to have a crack at field goal," that's huge shines, right? So, success or fail, regardless, just the desire and the want and the drive to be able to have the ball in his hands at that time. So, yeah, huge for them. Hats off to them. Obviously, Panthers come out of the gate and put two really quick tries on them. But then Penrith went 60 minutes without scoring a point. So quite impressive. If you look at the Titans, as far as their defensive efforts go, teams that have had Dragons, Raiders, Eels, Broncos, Storm, Tigers, Cowboys have all got worse defensive records than them. And the knock on the Titans have always been they can score points, but they struggle to defend. So they've obviously got a long way to go. But as far as the bottom half of the ladder goes, they've got one of the best defensive records. So if they can continue plugging away, and some of these young players can continue to get the reps under their belt. Oliver Pascoe at 9, Zane Harrison at 7 as an example. Even Keanu Kinney and Jaden Campbell are still fairly young in their careers.
Yep.
If they can continue to get them with the Arama Howes and the Cooper Byes developing as well, then huge upsides for the Titans. So couldn't be happier for them that and the fans that they got that result. It's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about a team that had only lost one game prior to the weekend, and that's even weeks when they've had players missing. So, yeah, that's a massive tick for the Titans. I heard Matty Johns talking about it during the week when he was saying that Todd Carney's doing some pretty cool stuff up there with the young halves and just teaching them, from someone who's made mistakes and got things wrong, but also, I don't know if you've listened to the Sixes and Sevens podcast, but he also he knows how to explain things in a way that's really easy to understand, and he's clearly doing some good work up there because, like you said, Zane Harrison, it wasn't just give me the ball and kick the field goal calmly. It was how he set up that last set to get them in the right position. He was patient. He waited for the quick play of the ball, and then he just banged it over as calmly as you like. As you said, he seems to have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Warriors Cowboys. Now, I just want to start by saying, we copped a fair bit of shit because we were talking about a refereeing decision against for the Broncos when they were playing the Warriors, and mate, they come at us hard. But I'm starting to warm to what they said about the refereeing, because they scored one of, for me, it would have been the try of the year. It went through probably about 12 sets of hands, and it was just lightning. And there was a couple of little nice little inner plays in that backline movement, and then they go over in the corner. And I said to you before we hit record, I watched it about 10 times, and I couldn't for the life of me see where the forward pass was. Absolutely dudded.
Yep. Yeah, the Warriors fans certainly come out after us, and they were right in this instance. There's been a couple, and look, every fan base can go back through their season and think they were hard done by a few different times. But, that for me would have been one spectacular try that we would have been watching over and over again. The Warriors were very impressive. Obviously, they've still been missing a couple of the big boppers up front with some injuries. But Nickel Clockstead getting 4 tries in the first 47 minutes was pretty impressive. He was really good. Tamari Martin been very impressive with how he's come in on the back of the injuries that they've had in the halves over the last sort of 18 months, I guess. Metcalf, he's kept Metcalf on the bench, and for him to be able to play as well as what he's done has been quite impressive. But look, the Cowboys hung in there. It was only 14-10 at half time, but just when the Warriors got into their groove and got going, they were just far too good. So Jackson Ford will be a big loss for them. We're still waiting to hear results. It looks like a pec injury. If he's out for extended time, that'll be tough for him, or tough for them. But they're an impressive side, mate, and I can see them, as we've spoken about, especially if they can finish in the top 2. I can see them being there on grand final day.
Absolutely. I can't see him changing the halves. I don't think Metcalf gets a look in. Harris Tavita and Tamari Martin have just been doing such a great job. And we've talked ad nauseum of the speed and power that Warriors team has across the park. We need to give a shout out to Scotty Drinkwater. He cops a fair bit of shit about his defence, but he made 2 fantastic tackles, try-saving tackles in that game, and credit where it's due. Good signs for the Drags too, mate. He's putting the body on the line, so he's 31, but he's still got plenty of physicality in him. Yeah,
that's why he started defending well, mate, because he's the Dragons' fullback, and our fullback always has to do a lot of defence, mate. No, I joke with that. Now, look, Drinkwater's the Dragons haven't bought him for his defence. Obviously, he's a good organiser. All jokes aside, from the back there, but yeah, he's always been very impressive with the ball. Obviously, the Taumalolo, we shouldn't go by without mentioning the sin bin. That certainly played a part as far as that lobbed the Cowboys off from any outside chance of coming back. But yeah, the Warriors were far too good. They're going to keep on a roll. The Jackson 4-1 will just be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll certainly miss him if he's out for extended period. Storm Raiders. Now, the Raiders haven't been travelling fantastically, but they always seem to get up against the Storm and get good results. But the Storm keep rising. The Raiders seem to have completely stalled. So I called that 4 weeks ago that I thought they'd go on a bit of a run. Well, the run that they've gone on is an absolute flatlining because any chance of them finishing as a serious title contender this year seems to be gone.
Yeah. Look, we mentioned it earlier. Basically, it was 14-0 when Harry Grant come onto the field, and it finished 42-20. So while Harry Grant was on the field, it was 42-6. He is by far and away the best hooker in the game. You know, I called it early. If someone was going to knock Cleary off for Dally M, it was going to be Grant. Unfortunately for Harry Grant, Storm haven't got off to a great start to the season. You know, and we've spoken about that at great lengths. But he is just a phenomenal player. Backing up from an 80-minute Origin performance to play the way he did, I don't think he's had the credit for the Maroons either. I think he's been integral in the first two games. And he was just outstanding the way he played. You know, Munster got in there and got his try on his 250th, which is a pretty cool occasion. 250 for a club like the Storm is a big deal. So, look, they've kept getting better from the time they've sort of realised the new way they're playing the game, and they've changed up their tactics with the six agains, etc. They've gone on a roll. So at the moment, they look like, even from now 11th spot, 4 points out of the 8. I would be very worried if I had one of those bottom spots of the 8 because the Storm are coming. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, you're right about Harry Grant. I think to be fair, last year wasn't one of his best years. And whenever that happens, when a player sort of falls off the cliff a bit, you wonder whether they had carrying a niggling injury that they just didn't tell the world. But this year, since they've been on that roll, he has been unbelievable. And, yeah, he's killed us at Origin, both games. And, yeah, to back up and go as good as he has, he may, because, you know, he still may have been banking some points. I wasn't following that closely. He still may have been banking some points at the start of the year, was he? And maybe he still is a smoky if he keeps wrapping up big games, and anything's possible.
Yeah, not sure how he lobbed when it went behind doors. I think after a certain amount of time, but yeah, he's been good. Look, I think, you know, we flip it onto the Raiders' head. They completed at 75%, just simply not good enough. So they got out of the gates, and then as the game progressed, they just couldn't keep up with the Storm. So they're going to need to have a bit of a look at a number of things. And I think for them, you know, Ethan Strange is just such an important part, but they need to start getting him some help and assistance. So hopefully for them, Ethan Sanders can continue to develop. Obviously, Cody Black was the gun junior from the Broncos they signed. I think Ethan Sanders has certainly been doing enough to keep his spot, but they're just going to need a little bit more if they're going to start to rebuild for next year. You know, we'll wait till after Origin to start putting a red line through teams, but the season for the Raiders is over this year. It'll just be what they can get out of that development for those younger players.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I talk about this nearly every week, and I think I said this last week. The Sharks have put together a couple of good performances. Maybe they're on the rise. Well, again, I've stopped a train because they crashed back down to earth. And some for those that get frustrated at players like Ronaldo Militano, they would have enjoyed every moment of the shenanigans going on there on Saturday when Nwanga Nitawazi was giving it to him after his 2 tries.
Yeah, how good was it to see those two go at each other? They're two fairly big men for wingers at least, and they're going at each other full on. And obviously, Mark got over the top of him a couple of times there at the end. Ronaldo got one early, but just good footy. You know, they're both absolute weapons who don't like taking a backward step. So they're both players you'd want to play with, no question. But yeah, look, I've been fairly high on the Roosters for a little while now. They took a little bit of a dip around that first Origin period, but they were quite impressive. If you look across the stats, there isn't much splitting the two teams. There was a little bit in running meters and post-contact meters that favoured the Roosters, but across the stats, they're pretty close to identical. But when it counted, the Roosters were just too polished and too good. You know, the Lindsay Collins try was a bit of a runaway try, but the other 4 tries were all their outside backs. So traditionally, the Sharks are a very good defensive side in their back 5. So wingers, centres, but the Roosters just got over the top of them and were just too strong for them. So for me, this puts the Sharks where we thought they'd be in the bottom half of the 8, looking like they need a little bit of a kickstart, and it puts the Roosters right in the firing line for the top 4. So I can see them and the Dolphins starting to assert their dominance and lock in the top 4 spot along with Penrith and the Warriors. And these next couple of weeks through the back end of Origin 3 will be a telling story to that, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about potential shifts in the power rankings, and that's exactly what we've seen. The Roosters keep rising, the Dolphins keep rising, and that's what we've come up with. Tell us where we're at with that.
Yeah, mate. I caught up with Jacob Gagan today, and he's given us our new Penrith new power ranking. So Penrith and Warriors stay at 1 and 2, but the Dolphins and the Roosters leapfrog Manly to go into 3 and 4. And Manly's still in 5th spot, so quite interesting. I did mention the Knights getting a win against the Drags is a big achievement these days, so I thought they might get a sniff, but yeah, he's got his eye on them to see how they go. But look, you can't argue, especially that top 4. I think not only obviously on the ladder, but just the way they're playing. And if you looked at the team lineups, even they've got the 4 best rosters in the comp: Penrith, Warriors, the Dolphins, and the Roosters. So I can see that they're going to be very hard to beat. From someone outside of the top 4, it's almost impossible anyway. But to come up against those 4, I think that's where the premiership winner is as it stands now. No injuries, mate.
Yep, I think you are spot on. Now, I just had a thought. I'm just looking at that ladder and going, both of us sort of made some bold calls that have come off. Other parts of what we picked on that ladder are nowhere near, but maybe it's time next week that we do a bit of a review of what we said at the start of the year and where it's at now. I don't think we'd be the only ones who have got that horribly wrong, because I don't think anyone would have predicted the amount of new teams that have slid into that top 4. But yeah, let's do that for next week as well.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, mate.
Thank you so much to all the listeners and viewers. We appreciate having you. If you've got any feedback about how we do it, anything else you want to hear about, as I've talked about before, if you're a fan of a team and you want to come on and have your say, let us know. But you've actually got to be up for it, because we've had a few people say, oh, yeah, I'll come on. But then when it comes to the crunch, they've bailed. So, if that's something you want to do. And, we love the listener questions and feedback too, because we'll make sure we include those on the pod.